The wind rolled across the desolate plains of the New Mexico frontier like a whisper from ghosts long buried under the dust. The sun had just begun its slow descent, stretching shadows over the tall yellow grass that swayed like waves. At the edge of this forgotten land stood a small, weathered ranch, broken fences, a creaking windmill, and a man who had spent too many years in silence. His name was Eli Carter. A former Civil War scout, now a lonely rancher, his eyes had seen too much, and his heart had long stopped hoping for anything to change. He lived by routine, waking before dawn, feeding the livestock, fixing what broke, eating in silence, and falling asleep under the creaking fan above his single bed. He hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks. He preferred it that way, or so he told himself. But fate doesn't knock. Sometimes it bleeds into your life screaming for help. Eli had just returned from checking the western fence line. A coyote had been picking off his hens again. He leaned his rifle against the wooden post and was reaching for the barn latch when he heard it, a voice, hoarse and cracking, carried by the wind like a ghost from another world. "Please, help me." He froze. The words were real, human, raw. He turned slowly, unsure if his mind was playing tricks. But then he saw her. She stumbled into view from beyond the dry brush, a young woman, barefoot, wrapped only in what looked like a torn white sheet, her arms smeared in dirt and blood, her long brown hair matted with sweat and grime. Her legs shook with every step, and her eyes, those eyes, looked hollow, scared, desperate. She clutched the fabric to her body with trembling hands, every inch of her skin bruised and battered. Eli took a step back, his breath caught in his throat. She collapsed against the fence post, one hand reaching out. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible now. "Don't let them find me." "Ma'am," Eli said, his voice cracking from disuse. "Are you hurt?" She nodded slowly, her whole body shivering despite the heat. Her lip was split. Her shoulder looked dislocated, and there was blood, fresh blood, dripping from her thigh. Eli stepped closer, then stopped. He didn't want to frighten her. She was already terrified beyond words. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "Can you walk?" She tried to stand, failed, and collapsed again. Her eyes rolled up. Eli didn't think. He moved. He reached down and scooped her into his arms. She was light as air, but her body tensed under his touch. He carried her into his cabin, gently placing her on the old cot by the fireplace. She clutched the sheet tighter as she lay there, too weak to speak. Eli worked fast. He fetched clean water from the well, tore strips from an old flannel shirt, and began cleaning her wounds. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He could see the pain in her body, the fear in her every breath. She wasn't just hurt, she was hunted. When she awoke an hour later, her eyes fluttered open to the sound of crackling fire. She jerked upright, gasping. Eli was sitting across the room watching her, his rifle propped beside him. She looked down at herself, then up at him. "You didn't," she started, her voice rough. "No, ma'am," Eli replied. "You were bleeding. I patched you up, that's all." She stared at him for a long moment, unsure whether to believe him. But something in his eyes, the quiet, steady kindness, made her lower her shoulders slightly. "I don't know your name," he said, standing slowly. "But I figure you've been through hell. I won't ask anything you're not ready to say." She looked away, then spoke in a whisper. "Lena." He nodded. "Lena, you're safe here. No one's gonna hurt you again." But safety is a fragile thing on the frontier, and the past never stays buried for long. She ate that night in silence, half a piece of cornbread and a sip of broth. Her hands shook as she brought the spoon to her lips. Eli didn't push. He only watched. When she finally spoke, it came like a flood. They took me from a stagecoach. 3 men said they wanted money, but they had other plans. I ran when they started fighting over me. I don't know how far I came. I just ran. Eli's hands tightened around his cup. Rage burned in his gut, but he didn't let it show. He nodded slowly. "You're safe now," he repeated, but Lena didn't believe it. Not yet. That night, she slept in his bed while he sat guard by the door, rifle across his knees. The prairie was silent, but Eli knew better than to trust silence. Come morning, Lena stirred with a scream. Eli was at her side in a flash, calming her, assuring her she was still safe. She clung to his shirt, sobbing like a child. It was the first time in years he let someone touch him. Over the next few days, Lena healed. Her bruises faded, her eyes lost some of their haunted depth. She wore one of Eli's old shirts, cinched at the waist with a bit of rope. She started helping around the cabin, fetching water, chopping vegetables, feeding the chickens. She didn't talk much, but when she smiled, it lit up the room. Eli started to remember what it felt like to live. But storm clouds gathered on the horizon. One evening, while Eli was out repairing the northern fence, he saw something. Horse. Tracks. Fresh. Headed toward the cabin. He followed them, heart pounding. 3 riders, the same number Lena had mentioned. When he returned to the cabin, she was standing outside, staring at the horizon, pale as ash. "They're coming?" she whispered. Eli didn't ask how she knew. Some part of her had always known they would find her. "We can run," she said, tears in her voice. "No," Eli replied, stepping beside her. "I ain't running, not again." That night, he sharpened his knife, loaded his rifle, and locked every door and window. Lena sat by the fire, arms around her knees. "I brought this on you," she said softly. Eli shook his head. "You didn't bring anything. Evil rides on its own legs, but I ain't letting it inside my home." She reached out and took his hand. It was the smallest gesture, but for Eli Carter, it was everything. Dawn broke red over the plains, and the devils were almost here. The wind howled through the canyons like a warning, dry and fierce, stirring dust across the worn floorboards of Eli Carter's ranch. The morning sun, blood red, rose slowly over the hills, casting long shadows like fingers reaching across the land. Inside the cabin, Eli stood still, his rifle loaded, back against the door, listening for the first sound of hooves on dry earth. Lena sat at the edge of the bed, dressed in one of his old jackets. Her bruises faded, but the fear still sharp in her eyes. She didn't sleep the night before. Neither did he. "You sure you want to stay?" Eli asked one last time. Lena didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, she said, "If I run again, I'll always be running. I want this to end." He gave a firm nod. "Then it ends here." An hour passed before the silence broke, a distant clop of hooves. Then more. Eli stepped outside and saw them coming from the east. 3 men on horseback, dressed in dust-covered black coats and wide-brimmed hats. Each carried rifles slung over their backs, and one had a whip tied at his saddle. Eli walked out to the middle of his field, rifle in hand, calm as the still air before a storm. The men stopped their horses about 30 feet from him. "Morning," said the man in the center, his voice slick like oil. He smiled, showing yellow teeth. "Name's Jeb. We're looking for something lost." Eli's eyes didn't blink. "Ain't nothing lost around here, only folks trying to be left alone." The man laughed. "She came through here, didn't she? Girl, pretty thing, real wildcat. We got business with her." "She's under my roof now," Eli said, his voice like steel. "You want her. You go through me. The man's smile disappeared. The others gripped their reins tighter. You're making a mistake, old man. Eli raised the rifle slowly, the barrel steady. I've made plenty. I won't add this. One. For a moment, the three sat still, trying to read the fire in Eli's eyes. Then the man named Jeb gave a nod, and chaos erupted. The one on the left drew a pistol and fired, but Eli had already dropped to a knee and squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder, and the gunman fell backward, blood spilling into the dust. The second rider charged forward, yelling, but Lena had appeared at the cabin door. She raised Eli's old shotgun, hands trembling, and fired. The blast threw the man from his horse. He hit the ground with a sickening thud. Only Jeb remained. He turned his horse in panic, kicking up dirt as he fled toward the hills. Eli rose, aimed, and fired again. The bullet struck the horse's leg, and the beast collapsed, throwing Jeb hard into the ground. He groaned, trying to crawl away, his hand reaching for his revolver. Eli walked forward slowly, rifle pointed at the squirming man. Lena followed behind, her face pale but determined. Jeb looked up at them, blood on his teeth, hate in his eyes. You think this is the end? He spat. She's got more coming. More men. You can't protect her forever. She doesn't need forever, Eli said quietly. She only needs today, and he pulled the trigger. The sound echoed across the plains like a final word in a long-forgotten language. Silence followed. Lena dropped the shotgun and collapsed to her knees. She sobbed, not just from fear, but from release. From the heavy burden finally lifted. Eli turned, crouched beside her, and held her close. For a man who hadn't known warmth in years, his arms now held a world. The bodies were buried by the creek, not out of honor, but to keep the wolves away. Eli said no words. The prairie had heard enough screams. Days passed. Lena began to heal in truth. The cuts and bruises faded, but so did the shadows in her eyes. She laughed now, softly but honestly. She sat with Eli during supper, sometimes even sang while fetching water. One evening, she cooked beans that actually tasted like something other than ash, and Eli pretended to hate them just to hear her giggle. You'll need more help on this ranch, she said one day, hands on her hips. You offering? Eli asked with a rare smile. I'm not leaving, she replied. Not unless you send me away. I reckon I'd be a fool to do that. And so she stayed. The days became weeks. Summer slowly gave way to the early whisper of fall. The land remained wild, unpredictable. But the cabin, once a tomb of silence, was now filled with life again. One night, sitting on the porch under a sky littered with stars, Lena turned to him. You saved me, she said. Not just from them, from everything. Eli didn't answer right away. Then he said, Maybe you saved me too. A pause. I was already dead when you knocked on my land. She took his hand in hers, squeezing it gently. And for the first time in years, Eli Carter felt like a man again. Not just a broken soul guarding a piece of dirt, but someone who had purpose, who mattered. The past didn't vanish. It never does. But out there, on the edge of nowhere, two wounded hearts found something rare, a reason to keep going. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment. One voice. Please, help me. And everything changes. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more powerful Western tales that blend raw emotion, unforgettable characters, and stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. There's more coming your way only on this channel. Hit that bell, stay with us, and we promise we'll keep riding into the heart of the frontier, one story at a time.